So the reason that I asked Jim here, and thank you for being here.
He asked me to come because I still use this.
No, I told him, I was just telling him.
I'm the only person left here that uses it.
When I first met Jim, I was like, you got to get rid of this BlackBerry. And so I just told him up there I was going to go to the iPhone store and get him an Apple store and get him an iPhone. He's trying to explain to me why he doesn't need one.
Uh-oh, one iPad down.
Still going. So the reason I asked Jim, I met Jim through obviously through Paul, who he and I are partners at Amplify, and I have been an entrepreneur on the software side. I don't really know anything about the entertainment space or Hollywood, but I'm a very avid movie watcher. I've just always been fascinated growing up as a kid, and so when I got to meet Jim first, I was just like really interested in what you were about and learning the whole transformation of our LA ecosystem with media and tech kind of converging, and you hear this like the convergence of media and tech, like you hear that all the time, but I don't exactly know what that means and how that works, and so I've been hammering Jim like, hey, I want to get you in here, I just want to ask you questions and I want to learn more about your experience, your life, and what your thoughts are on this whole convergence thing. So that's kind of the goal of the evening. I'm going to talk to him for like 40 minutes or so. We'll save time for some questions, and then you'll be on your way. I think you got an event at Shay J or something like that.
No,
oh.
Georgia.
Some other fancy.
More expensive.
So just a quick.
But I did have my first underage drink at Shay J. Nice. I was born and raised here, so.
Hold on to that story. We'll come back to that one. So just if you don't know who Jim is, the guy's been in the entertainment sector for a long time. He looks only in his 30s, but apparently he's older than that.
Ed Wilson.
He's here. He was on that bus. Jim, was at William Morris for a number of years. Was the chairman there. Before that, he was ICM. He's been all over the place, and a lot of people still consider him to be one of the most. You probably don't know if you'd like to hear this, but one of the most powerful men in Hollywood, and certainly when you're in the thick of it, I'm pretty certain that you were. So the knowledge and experience you have is pretty fascinating. So I guess my first question for you is, let's go back 30 years. I think that was sort of when you started, and some pretty famous people came out of the mailroom. Did you actually work the mailroom?
I did not, but I just, since I was just telling you before, I'm going to go back further, because I'm born and raised here in Los Angeles, and I first thought when I was very young, I had the opportunity when I was 8 years old to meet Martin Luther King, who was at my parents' home when they, way back when, had a fundraiser here when it was very unpopular to do so. And I got very politically interested, and then when I started at USC, I was at the Ambassador Hotel the night that Robert Kennedy was assassinated. Wow. And I'm just giving you all this as background. I met a man that night who was then Congressman John Tunney, and I ended up working for him, worked on his Senate campaign, and when I finished school I ended up working for him in the U.S. when he was U.S. Senator for 6 years, until he lost, and then didn't know what I was going to do, moved to Telluride, Colorado for a year, and was a ski bum for a year, and then now I've gotten away from your first question. I mean, how I started.
Yeah, well, I was asking if you started actually in.
All right, so
can we speak up a little bit?
No. I started after John Tunney lost in 1976, and I went away for a while. I applied to the mailroom of then the two most powerful agencies were the William Morris Agency, which today would be 113 years old. And then it also at International Creative Management, which were then the two most powerful agencies, and I was turned down by both. And the reason I said I was turned down was because I had worked for a U.S. Senator, and I was, quote, too overqualified to be in the mailroom. So I got passed on, and I wasn't even sure what I wanted to do, but then somebody acquaintance of mine that I knew living here worked at a small little agency called the Frank Cooper Agency, which was at the 9000 Sunset Building in Sunset and Doheny. And I got hired there, and I was their mailroom. There were 3 people working there, so it was not really a mailroom, but I got a job working there. So I didn't start classically the way a lot of people, like, I went to see David Geffen, who's kind of a famous person. I saw his documentary last night, and Jeffrey Katzenberg, and I mean, there's, there's too many
Kevin
names to
started
mention.
at the
Everybody,
mailroom.
so many people started in the mailroom at these agencies, and that's how they got their careers going. But anyway, so I did not start at those mailrooms, and then should I just keep
just
talking?
kind of keep talking
I'll just
about
keep
the
talking.
story.
So about 18 months after working at the Frank Cooper agency, where I somehow was the mailroom, but also started going to out to studios and started quote we called it cover. You would go cover. Oh, David Carter's in the room. This is big. I would go out to studios, and in those days there were only the movie and television business, and there was a music business too, but the movie and television business were really the big businesses. So
This was mid-70s.
It was toward 1978, and I got to meet Lou Wasserman, who was very famous, one of the most famous people in the entertainment business, and met a lot of other people. And I was then approached by a very famous, one of the most famous women ever in the entertainment business, a woman named Sue Mengers, who passed away last year, but she was a living legend. She was the most powerful, in those days, to have a woman be in a powerful position. She was by far and away the most powerful person in the entertainment business, and she represented big stars. Anyway, I was introduced to her by somebody, and next thing I knew, I was being interviewed by her and a man named Guy McElwain at ICM, and I got hired. Ostensibly, Scott Siegler's leaving.
Oh, you called me. I'm gonna watch on tape.
Okay. He and I have known each other a long time. Great guy, by the way. Anyway, I got hired at ICM, and ostensibly the reason I was hired was, even though I didn't know anything about the music business, to be the person that would be the go-between between the movie business and the music business. And I had been at ICM all of 2 weeks, and should I just keep rambling?
Yeah, I'll intermix. You're getting right up to my next question, so
All
keep
right.
going with your
So
story.
keeping
I'll
rambling,
intertwine it.
keeping rambling about the mailroom. So anyway, I got hired by ICM, even though they didn't accept me in their mailroom. And this was then 1978, 79. And by 1985, I became president of ICM. So I didn't go through the mailroom, and I kind of went up the ladder pretty quickly. It was part of a public company, and I kind of wrote a lot of it off to the fact that I worked hard, and also maybe the competition wasn't that tough. And I'll just tell anecdotally if you want, because these things I just keep talking. But anecdotally, one of the first great things that happened to me in my career, most of the people in this room are not old enough to probably remember who Jan Michael Vincent or Gary Busey.
Yeah.
Okay, they were, at the time, Jan Michael Vincent was the Tom Cruise of his generation, and I knew Jan before I was in the entertainment business because we used to serve together at Topanga Beach, where I kind of had a shack and he lived. So I knew him, and then he worked on a movie called Big Wednesday with Gary Busey and a guy named William Catt. John Milius wrote and directed it. And long and short of the story is, I had been an agent all of 18 months. I had no idea what I was doing. And I went out to an apartment out in Malibu, and with Jan Michael Vincent and Gary Busey, and I met Willie Nelson. And this is before Willie was pretty famous in the country and western business, but most people really didn't know who he was. And I went out there, I was wearing a 3-piece suit, and I was sitting with Willie, who was smoking weed, and everybody was smoking weed except me, because I wasn't afraid to and intimidated to in front of all of them. And I was talking to Willie, and he kept looking at me and kept looking at me in the, just kind of staring at me, and I was talking to him, and I just said, God, I can't believe you're the man that did Redheaded Stranger, and I knew who he was. And he finally said, are you here to sell me insurance? and I said, no, I'm an agent. And he said, well, why are you wearing a 3-piece suit? And I said, well, that's because that's how we dress. And so anyway, we talked for a while, and he looked at me and he said, do you want to be my agent? And I talked to him, and I said, sir, I'm honored that you're asking me this, but I don't know what I'm doing. And he looked at me and held me by the face. I'll never forget this. I'm getting chills thinking about it. He said, you'll learn. And we were together, and we're still together ever since. So that was my first big break. And then a year later, Willie was on the cover of Time magazine, on the cover of Rolling Stone, and he's Willie Nelson. He still is Willie Nelson. Anyway, that was, so I got away from being in the mailroom. So I didn't start in the mailroom, but I did end up at
That was
ICM.
before you became president of IC.
That was before, and then I started getting representing other clients and signing clients and making deals for people. You kind of learned as you went.
And so that kind of does jump into my next thing. So I was born in the 70s, but I really kind of watched the 80s. So you're now in the 80s there. It's a pretty wild time in Hollywood, I would imagine.
No comment.
So
Not if you're
there's
filming.
you must have like a cool story that's somewhat on the fringe that you could share about the 80s, something that we might recognize.
Well,
don't know.
I can tell you just from anecdotes, because there are a lot of stories, and I can tell you about, I can allude to wild times, but I was thinking about it today when I talked to Jeff this morning. I was just trying to think of like things that are memorable that stick out, and this is like one that's just, we'll never forget. When John Denver, I don't know if many of you people here remember John Denver, who passed away unfortunately, who was just a great guy. Anyway, I started working with John Denver. This is back in 1984, was he recording this?
Yeah.
Somewhere like in the mid-80s when Johnny Carson was doing the Tonight Show. This is one of the biggest show on nighttime television. Anyway, I went with John Denver and his then manager, who I will not mention his name because it'll be on camera because I still know him very well, and he's a famous guy. And we were backstage in the green room before John Denver was coming on, and Johnny Carson and his producer came in and he said, look, we're going to just, like the prep, we're going to talk about a lot of different things, and you can talk about Rocky Mountain High and talk about, how you did this, and, we may get into some issues because somebody then, Johnny Carson was being kind of a wise guy. I said, I think one of the subjects we're going to talk about is because it was in the news then about euthanasia, and they leave the room, and John Denver's manager, John Denver said, well, what's euthanasia? And his manager said, well, it's kids in Asia. He goes on out there in front of Johnny Carson, and he brings up euthanasia. He says, he said, I'm really interested in kids in Asia. It was like one of those oh my God, it was like one of those great moments. Sorry, it was just anecdotes, just great moments. Anyway.
Well, keep that in your mind. If another little story pops into your mind, just stop me and tell me, because that's part of what I really want to do.
Well, I mean, there's other stories, but I was trying to think of like stories like what you happen when you're in Asia. The last one, when you start representing, if you can represent stars, that's like the most, it's like amazing. And I worked with Eddie Murphy when he was 19 years old on Saturday Night Live, and worked with Eddie his entire career. And he did a movie at Paramount called Harlem Nights that he did with Richard Pryor, who I also had the great honor of working with, which was amazing to be able to work with Richard Pryor. Anyway, they were doing this movie together, and I went to the set at Paramount Studios, and I went on Richard Pryor's bus, and he closes the door, and he said, listen, motherfucker, excuse my language, you shouldn't do this in front of your kids, David, I'm sorry.
He's 16.
I know, but just in case. Anyway, he said, I just want to let you know something. You're fired. And I said, well, why am I fired? I put this movie Harlem Nights together with Eddie and you. I got Paramount to buy it, and what did I do wrong? And a lot of times when you do companies and a lot of you are involved with them, you'll have a fictitious name. And like in this one, in the Paramount Studios, because they didn't have the name Harlem Nights, it was called blank. And he said, you booked me in this movie, and you don't even know what movie I'm doing. This isn't Harlem Nights, it's called blank. Anyway, that's why he fired me. So I was like, okay. It was
That was it?
That was it. He fired me right there in the trailer. Said, get out of my trailer. You don't even know what movie I'm doing. I said, okay.
So
Anyway.
You'd said that at that time it was pretty much just TV and movies that you were representing, but that's obviously...
And then music.
Yeah, that obviously has continued to change. I mean, obviously now you guys are getting into all kinds of stuff. I guess the question for the agency, what is their role? What does their future role look like where, television and the big entertainment categories are not as core anymore?
Yeah.
What do they do in the future?
Well, the core still is, you know, you want to represent talented people, but one of the first things when I worked for this gentleman, Frank Cooper, who was really a great gentleman, and he would sit down and talk to me, he said, here's what you need to do. This is when I was starting. He said, you need to work 7 days a week. You need to go down to local theater. When you go to New York, you need to go to theater. You need to read. You need to spend your entire time, whatever you do, learning, going out, meeting people, trying to attract business, trying to get a reputation for yourself. So he said, and everything that you do is about your client. You have to love your client. You have to work with them. It's all about them. It's not about you. You don't want any press. You don't want to do anything. It's all about them. And what happened over the years was it transcended into how do the clients help us? So it was a change that came over time, and it was in some instances subtle, but it really then became like, well, if I'm representing so-and-so, you know, how can I use that to get me into different businesses? Or how can I use that to, you know, better myself? And it wasn't so much, yeah, you want to do a good job for the clients, because you in theory always do, but it wasn't what you really were always focused on.
Is that a bad thing or a good thing?
Well, I mean, it's a good thing if you're building a company, and the clients, in some sense, benefit from it because you get into different businesses, and a lot of times what you didn't have to do in the old days when I started is if, you know, you wanted to go get, you know, get a movie made, a lot of the times I'd find myself on airplanes finding money and getting movies financed because the studios wouldn't do it. So you had to evolve into that point of, you know, of finding other sources of opportunity and revenue from what I would call non-traditional, which used to be the studios used to make and control everything, and then it changed.
Do you think that the talent agency still has a big role in the whole ecosystem with the various types of talent and the types of projects and the whole, now there's talent being involved with startups and technology companies? Are they critical to the ecosystem still? Yeah,
they're critical to the ecosystem because it's still, what still works is if you're running a television network or cables or movies or independent movies, whoever intellectual property is getting created, it still is a place where people can call, access talent. You know, there really isn't, I don't think a movie star that exists or anybody of any substance that lives without an agent and or a manager. But yes, it's still kind of in a sense the heart and soul of how it really still operates. But everybody in the most successful companies are doing a lot of other things other than just what I would call traditional, what used to be where I grew up, traditional agenting. You're starting startup companies, you're representing brands. Like when at William Morris, which I ran for a decade, you know, we represented big stars. I mean, I worked with Eddie Murphy and Russell Crowe and Barbra Streisand, and you know, keep going with a lot of different people. But you know, some of our biggest clients that I worked with were Starbucks, General Motors, AT&T. They became our clients, and what they wanted to was access to talent in a sense, but they wanted really, you know, like strategy and how to help evolve media campaigns in conjunction with their advertising companies. They thought it was important that they had that kind of contact and relationship with people that could put them in touch with movies, television, theater, and also help them formulate how they can best organize their selling of their wares.
So what percentage
and I'll give you an example. General Motors, who I work with, the movie Transformers, which probably a lot of you have seen, the reason that Transformers got financed, it was a co-production at the time between DreamWorks, and this is before DreamWorks Animation started. This was DreamWorks, which was Jeffrey Katzenberg, Steven Spielberg, and David Geffen. They developed Transformers with Paramount. It was a co-production. So DreamWorks put in money, and Paramount put in money. The budget of the movie, a guy named Michael Bay was the director, a very talented guy. The budget of the movie was, you know, like $125 million. The studio said they wouldn't make the movie because they didn't want to spend that much money. It didn't have a big star in it. It was really more of, you know, big gamble on a brand that really didn't probably deserve to spend that much money. But what we did with General Motors is I got them to invest $25 million in cash, and the Transformer became their new Chevy. So that was really a way of mixing brands into movies, and Transformers would not exist had it not been for General Motors.
I mean, that,
And the interesting thing about General Motors thing, because I said to them when I flew to see Rick Wagner in Detroit and talked to him about this, I said, look, I want to get you guys 5% of the gross. And they didn't care, they didn't want it, which to them to this day probably have been worth $100 million. But strangely enough, it just wasn't their business, wasn't their model, and they didn't want it, which was amazing to me because they could have gotten it.
they just wanted 5% of our growth.
Yeah, but anyway, I'm just giving that as an anecdote because that's what agencies ended up doing. You get into a lot of different.
So when did you notice first that like technology companies into the technology category was working its way into your business? I mean, you now have big brands coming in. Now tech companies are coming in. When did you start to see that happening?
Well, I think it kind of over the last decade, you could kind of feel it and see it. Like when Google was, Google was formed, but I was very fortunate, still fortunate to have a friend named Eric Schmidt, who's chairman of Google and was chairman and CEO of Google, and he would come down here and meet with me and spend a lot of time with me a lot because he thought that the integration of the media world and the access to that would be helpful to Google. And so the integration of what we would do is we would work with Google, and I was YouTube's and Google's content advisor. This was 6 years ago, told Eric and Sergey Brin and Larry Page they should buy Time Warner. But they didn't want to because, I said this was before Netflix. I said you guys should be the ultimate distribution company. So I'm kind of getting off on a bit of a tangent, but the reason that they were in is because they knew as a distribution company and as a search engine, they wanted access to, to media. They wanted access to entertainment, brand names. So that was I could see over a period of time that would happen. Then of course, you can name all the companies that certainly integrated it. Apple and pick companies. Even AT&T with all the technology and all their stuff. They were a client and they wanted access to entertainment to see how that could help push their new iteration of their new, their phones. So you could see it creep in, and it's become certainly part of the fabric of what all of us do, and certainly everybody in the entertainment business is fabric of what they do.
Was there a time you can recollect that someone or some company came in maybe prior to that was sort of seeing the future of what was about to happen, but couldn't get people to believe in the vision? Those sort of early adopter kind of people that are, hey, this is what's gonna happen. Did you see anything like that and someone got stonewalled, or like, no, that's never gonna happen, or no, this is a different world? Like, was there a period where it was?
Yeah, I kind of saw it. I guess when I really became aware of it, when a close friend of mine, Richard Rosenblatt, and we were talking about Josh Berman before, when Intermix sold, Rupert Murdoch, MySpace for $625 million, and that was 7 years ago, probably 6-7 years ago. And that was when you would see a company, okay, that's when all of a sudden a big major conglomerate public company said, okay, we need to be in the social media business, and we're going to go buy that. We're going to go buy that company. That was the first company to really go buy it.
Well, there was when the AOL Time Warner thing happened.
Yeah, well, I was trying to forget about that. Yeah.
Well, it was
Mike, and by the way, Steve Case, at the time, the people was Jerry Levin, who was running Warner Brothers at the time, and Steve Case. They were probably 10 years ahead of.
So was it a timing issue with that deal?
I think it was a timing issue. If it had happened again today, given all the distribution and given we're Netflix or Hulu or picking.
Was that their vision? Was that the
back then? I think they thought it was partially the vision, which is we have this technology and distribution that's global, and you can distribute product, we can distribute product more this way. The problem is that the companies like Time Warner, this was the good old boy network, is to get people to integrate it, all work together for the common good was impossible. So it ended up being a disaster, and a lot of people are still to this day resentful of it because their stock options were all underwater.
It was exciting. I don't know. I remember it. How many years ago was that? Does anyone recall when that was?
Back
it was like
1990.
Yeah, late 90s,
98.
like 96, 97. I just remember that happening. I thought, for the people that were telling me that this internet thing was not gonna be that big when that happened, I was just like,
yeah, no, and again, if you were to fast forward, if that had happened today, like if Google were to, there's a lot of rumors going around that Sony is for sale, Sony Entertainment. It wouldn't be out of the question to think that somebody like Apple or, some other company, as I told you, that 6 years ago I told Eric Schmidt he should buy Time Warner. They probably won't do it because they want to be quote agnostic, but and they don't want to favor anybody. But it wouldn't be shocking to see somebody buy, a company like Sony that maybe comes from it very powerful.
Those guys back there having a little, speak up a little louder. Just
What?
So everyone can hear. So I have this, sort of bringing back the talent thing. I have this crazy notion that like, there's this old vision of, the talent is these like artists that are, they're on TV, they're on, they're movies, maybe they're making music. There's certain sort of what you think talent is. But then in our world, the tech world, you think of talent, you think of like, oh, a rock star programmer or an amazing product person, or there's just these people, and the recruiters are essentially sort of talent agents. I don't think they have the same, I don't know if there's any recruiters in the room, there probably are. But in my experience, then it doesn't have the same feel as what you described as a talent agency. But to me, that's the new talent in a lot of ways. Do you think that the talent agencies, the William Morris, CSA, see people like that and say, you know what, I could actually leverage that person and put them into various situations and maximize their talent, as opposed to just a recruiter saying, hey, you should go work for Google, and then they spend the next 5 years at Google? Do you think those kinds of people will ever become talent? Or is it just not the same, where when you go into a movie, you go to the next movie, you go to the next movie? It's that model.
It's hard. I'm not sure I can give an exact answer here. I don't see that as part of the model now. I think it's kind of specialized in the sense there's, the agency business are used to working, and even though they've expanded in a lot of areas, getting down to the level which you just described is probably not a level that people do.
Yeah,
it's not to say that, by the way, that people have not, gotten jobs as a result of somebody making a call, and certainly have, and had nothing to do with movies or television.
I guess the question is, and this could be just a pipe dream, but the idea of maybe not getting jobs, but getting projects. And if you go to an Apple or you go to a Google, they have really cool initiatives that maybe last a year, like a movie would. And would there be a time where like, there's these 100 so-and-so programmers, product people, designers, whatever, that are just so incredible that they're getting inserted into these projects across the various companies, like the best project going on, and it's more like you have to bring your talent in. Do you think that would ever happen? Has anyone ever thought about that? Is that just, yeah, sort of. I mean, it's kind of harder because it's usually projects aren't as much like that. Like if Apple found somebody to fit in one project and he was totally awesome, they're not going to let him go to the next project, right?
Well, so look at it. I think that's probably pretty similar in any business. Anybody who becomes like a star, like Henrique de Castro, who's a great guy who I know very well, is now going to be the CEO of Yahoo. Google wasn't expecting him to leave. Mm-hmm. So, and Marissa Mayer, who became CEO when we got our pal Ross Levinson, who brought here a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. We thought he was going to be the CEO, but that recruiting part of it, when you get to that level of people, there are people who identify that will, that will certainly try to be picked off by companies that are somehow competitive. So I remember years ago when I was at ICM, when we were part of a public company that we took private in 1989. One of the things that I wanted to do at the time, and I couldn't get the public board to go along with it, I wanted us to merge with, at that point, the most powerful search firm, or placement firm for people, thinking this would be the ultimate business, to be in a booking people business, but also just like you described, in the mix of it, I thought would have been really, really good. And
that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's exactly. We tried. I tried.
You tried to get it, but you didn't actually try to do it. You tried to get somebody to try to do it.
I tried to have our companies merge and do that, but I was outvoted in my
So that still might work. That still might work.
I still think it's probably a good idea, but whether it will ever happen in this day and age.
So I've noticed as being an Amplify that all the agencies are now inserting themselves into projects directly.
Yes.
Right? So, you know, CAA has Who Say and Funny or Die. William Morris has The Audience. And then they're getting involved in projects. All of them have now their little funds that they supposedly put money into things. I've never actually seen them write any checks yet. But, so, what are they doing? What do they think they're going to get? Are they really providing value? Is it good? What do you think about that whole?
Well, we did. I mean, Paul Rico, who a lot of you in this room know, and certainly you know, was kind of the architect of this place.
Mm-hmm.
Paul and I worked together for 10 years. It's probably 6 years ago. We started a company called the Mailroom Fund, and it was Randall Stevenson at AT&T, Jim Breyer from Axel, David Siminoff from the Rockefeller Foundation, and us. And the idea was kind of like what this place is starting basically to look for how using the talent of our company with those investors to go recruit and try to start interesting companies.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, anybody who's, you know, in the people business, anybody who wants to look at how you expand into different areas, are all going to be looking to get in those businesses. And everybody, I think, in the classic, or what we call talent agency business, are all in those businesses now.
Mm-hmm.
And why not? Because what you can lend to them in theory is access to your quote movie star or music clients, and I was lucky to represent Mick Jagger. You know, I called up Mick Jagger with an idea. You know, and if you could get him involved, and I did with different companies at the time, then geez, you know, that's incredibly value added on a global basis.
Mm-hmm.
As part of it is just getting global. A lot of you in this room are doing that. How do you get audience? How do you get recognized? How do you raise money? How do you become global? When a lot of other people are doing, you know, you've got a lot of competition, and so what can be value added is the quote celebrity part of it, and celebrity does not mean necessarily it's going to be successful. As you're looking at the YouTube channels and the ones that work, the ones that haven't, a lot of the celebrity channels haven't worked. So there's no guarantee. What it does do, though, it opens doors, and it does give you a chance to at least get acknowledged, and if your idea is good enough, then it will survive.
How do startups go the other way? Like, it's one thing for William Morris or CAA to say, oh, I'm going to do this because I see an opportunity, versus a lot of our startups and just people in the community, oh, I want to go that way. I want to get to CAA. I want to get to these celebrities. I want to do these things. How do they make something attractive so that those firms can get behind it and try something?
Well, I think, and I'm sure, again, there's probably people in this room, and I know from a personal standpoint, I'm involved with a lot of startup companies, either as an investor or advisor. And I think what a lot of companies tend to do is try to find people that have that access, and that, you know, I think that can be value added, whether it's to money or whether it's to celebrity or whether it's to more traditional, you know, sources or whether it's movies or television or music or publishing. You know, you're able to get recognition and get more playability by having somebody involved who has access to people that you couldn't get to.
Mm-hmm. So is still in your Rolodex? Your name you just said from the Rolling Stones.
Mick Jagger.
Mick Jagger.
Oh, him?
Is Mick Jagger still in your Rolodex? Can you, for your startups, can you call upon him?
If I pulled up my BlackBerry here and got ridiculed for it, I
think
guess
you'd
his
max
contact
out.
information is in here. Yes.
That's cool.
You put it on auction? Your phone?
Yeah.
Serious. Once you get the new phone, you put that one on auction.
I just like, thinking as I was just mentioning Mick Jagger's name, I remember Lorne Michaels, who started and still owns, you know, one of the most successful, probably the longest running television show, which is Saturday Night Live. I remember having dinner with Lorne and Mick Jagger at a restaurant in New York one night, and we were both just shocked. Every most beautiful woman you could think of kept coming up to the table saying, handing Mick Jagger their phone number, going, this is like too good to be true. And all we kept saying to him is, pass those over this. Being with him, but you know, that was, you know.
Did you get a few hand-me-downs from those days?
No, didn't work.
Probably wasn't so bad. Like, I'll take fourths, fifths.
Yeah, but no, it's good to have access to people like that, because you just never know when, you know, if you get somebody involved on that level, that somebody, you know, can really make a big impact.
Now, are the talent agencies gatekeepers for them to say yes or no, or does that more fall on their management groups? Like, you know, if you do get to, just using Mick Jagger again, like, how does he make a decision as to whether he's going to get involved in this project or that project?
Well, he has, you know, he has a partner named Victoria Perryman, who's been with him for 25 years, who he trusts very much when it comes to entertainment stuff, so he would probably talk to her more so than agent. He's had management in his career, so he would probably talk, but ultimately he makes his own decisions. But most people, talent, that kind of talent, all either have someone in their lives, whether a lawyer, agent, manager, who, you know, are the clearing place. And if the, you know, a lot of times people will listen. I mean, I've represented a lot of people. A lot of times they would listen, and a lot of times they wouldn't listen. But you know, you were there. You were truly the gatekeeper.
Did you ever give somebody a bad suggestion that why they did and then fired you? Or just were mad?
Richard Pryor fired me because he thought
But
I
that
was
way
going to move it into
he misunderstood the situation.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's part of the life of that business, is you could give somebody, you know, you could suggest you go in, or even if you told them not to do it and they did it, they're still going to blame somebody.
Right.
And one thing about that part of the business is there's always somebody to blame, and it tends to be the agent more so than the manager, and it's usually not the lawyer.
Do they get the credit too if you get a great project, or you
It
get
depends.
the worst of both worlds?
It depends on the. It really depends on the talent. You know, if people are either want to be generous or not generous, it's. I remember talking Nick Nolte into doing 48 Hours with Eddie Murphy, talking the two of them into doing that movie, and you know, Nick said, if this doesn't work, I'm going to fire you. And then when it worked, he said, I'm still thinking of firing you. But he didn't.
What about 48 Hours too? Did you talk him into that?
Talked him into that too. No, but you would do that. You know, I mean, that's part of the risk of you know, I was just, you know, thinking again of, you know, how many television shows work. You know, from when I always started, and from a lot of you in this room started, there were 3 broadcast networks: ABC, CBS, and NBC. Then came Fox. The cable business in the old days used to be Showtime and HBO. And now, I mean, you guys, you know, sure watch a lot of cable shows where some of the best television is, because broadcast television has become more reality television. Which is not a bad thing, since one of the investors here is Mark Burnett, who's the king of reality television. He's an investor here at Amplify. But you know, so the businesses have changed, but which is a good thing. There's a lot of content and a lot of opportunity, and it's not just about the way it used to be with a couple of movie studios and a couple of networks. The business has definitely changed though in the last 5-10 years. You know, 6-7 years ago, Disney would make 25 to 30 movies a year. That's a lot of movies. Now they make 10. You know, Warner Brothers used to make 30 to 35, now they make 16. So if you just look at the economics and you look at what's happened, is it's become like movies like Transformers, or, you know, big movies or big animated movies. And, you know, it's the movies that used to be part of the commodity of the movie business, where people would go maybe more adult oriented, or the themes would be more serious. And those are more of the endangered species, unfortunately. And a lot of that slack has been taken up through cable, which does, you know, a lot of cable are doing really a lot of good scripted television work.
Do you think
a lot of good scripted content work?
Will that transfer to online, and people will be starting watching shows on non-networks, non-cable channels, but just?
Well, this is the interesting, and everybody here, I'm sure, is thinking about this in some level. I mean, or at some level is, you know, right now that's always the rule of thumb. You know, like, what's the length that somebody will watch something on? So, whether it's 3 minutes, is it 6 minutes? There's no perfect answer. The research shows that maybe 6 minutes may be it, but, you know, is it too long in the future to think that if a quality company made a movie and distributed it first on Apple or Netflix, or pick, you know, is that time? When is that time going to come? I don't have the answer for it, but everybody's dancing around it. Everybody thinks it's going to happen. I have a 11-year-old and 13-year-old daughters, and I know when the television's on, they're looking at their little iPod, and they're playing games or watching content there. So, is it too far in the future to think that they would watch something there rather than watching a big screen? You know, it seems like they're already doing that.
Well, I now watch shows, HBO shows in bed, because my wife doesn't like my shows, so if I want to be with her, I have to watch on my little iPad while she's watching on her big.
Okay, so
big TV. So I am watching them.
So is the day coming when, and we're seeing it more with brands, will brands want to spend money to produce content that will maybe initially air there are a lot of different ways to distribute content. Is it possible to initially, air on some form of the internet or the web? Yeah, and the answer I think is yes. It's a question of how long it will be.
I asked you a question a couple months ago about the idea of taking a lot of shows, especially cable shows, don't last as long as some of the fans think they should, right? Like Battlestar Galactica, maybe I could have gone on longer. A lot of sci-fi shows because they're very expensive and they go off the air before their time. And anyway, my opinion, but there are huge fan bases for a lot of these shows. Like if you just Battlestar Galactica as an example, there's 1 million active people on Facebook that are like interacting with the show, and in fact they've now started doing webisodes actually. But I asked you about the idea of crowdfunding those shows. So going back to the fans and saying, hey, look, if you want this thing back on, it's $20 an episode. Would you pay? And people that I've talked to that are fans of shows are like, hell yeah, I'd pay that money. This show is awesome, and you completely circumvent the funding. Have you thought about that anymore? I know we talked about it a little bit.
We did talk about it. It's a good idea. I guess the conundrum in that is, let's say you want to do Battlestar Galactica, you would have to know if you're the people funding it, and there's the word deficit financing in the entertainment business has always been a key word. Is how much money do you invest in something to find out how many people will pay $15 or $20 at some point to see something, and you'd want to pretty much know if you could pre-sell it. And I don't have an answer for you, but I think it's an interesting.
That's essentially what Kickstarter has proven people are willing to do, is pre-sell stuff on the come. And if it's
a question of whether you can raise enough money to make Battlestar Galactica. I mean, which could cost $3 or $4 million.
When you have 1 million fans, there's another question.
I'm sorry?
So when there's 1 million fans that want to see the content.
Then at those economics, yes, and you could actually build a business.
It seems like only an amount of time before these shows, because this happens, because there's fans that are just like, I want it, and the actors still, in a lot of cases, want to do the shows. You had talked about other kinds of issues with that, like studio owns rights, and like
yes.
Then it becomes political challenges to get these things off the ground.
And you have union problems, because then the unions, there's minimum wage, and there's a lot of things to get over. Now, saying that, people are making, I know a number of people are making, inexpensive movies, and they make deals with the unions now to get past having to pay people what normal quote scale is, and you try to control the cost by having to make deals. Or unfortunately for the state of California, is after this post-election stuff, a lot of people don't shoot here because it's less expensive to go other places. So I do think getting back to your idea. I do think it's an interesting idea. And if you pick a show, Battlestar Galactica, would that be one where you could get 1 million people, pick a number that you throw out, where people will actually say that they will commit, and then you could go make 6 or 7 Battlestar Galacticas.
Right.
Then it's a question of how you distribute. Do you distribute it online, or you try to make a deal with Netflix, or with Hulu, or do you go to one of the broadcast networks, which is probably less likely, or to cable?
I don't know. You figure that out. I just want to watch it. Okay, so I'm going to ask one more question, then we'll open it up for other people to ask questions. So I've had this image in my head. It's a classic image. Girl from the Midwest gets on a bus, cruises out to LA, gets off the bus, starry eyes, like, hey, I'm gonna be a movie star, right?
There she is right there.
That's your thing.
I'm looking
okay,
at
so
you.
that's like a classic image, right? And
yeah.
And now I feel like it's, at least from our world, it's shifting in these largely guys are getting on the bus from the middle of nowhere, coming out to LA, San Francisco, Silicon Valley, wherever, and they're like, okay, I want to start my startup. Let's go. I'm ready to sell my company to Google. And like, is that shift really happening? And are people more interested in like starting their own company than being a movie star? Like, for a while it was like movie star or nothing. Like that was the only cool thing to do as a kid. But now it's like starting your own company and being a founder and selling your company to Facebook is like pretty fucking rad.
I think that's kind of, if you really love your profession, this gets into the, I mean, everybody, I guess most actors would want to be a movie star. I mean, you get into the business because you love your craft and you work really hard at it. You go do local theater and you try to get breaks. I remember when Meryl Streep started way back when, and I remember the conversations with her when she was starting doing local theater, and she evolved into the biggest movie star, female movie star. But looking around today, and you look, and if you were to sit here and take a vote of people in this room, and you try to name the 10 biggest movie stars, who are they? It used to be you would pay, I represent a number of people like them. Eddie Murphy used to get $25 million a movie. Not anymore. Because what's happened to the movie star system is, unless you could pull in, 125 million at the box office, because then 50% of that goes to the theater owners, then you have print and ad money, and the cost of all of it is, at some point, you figure out what your waterfall is and your break even is. But getting back to your question is, I think anybody who still loves their profession, and if somebody wants to be on stage, or somebody who really loves to do this, will dream of being a movie star. And I think that will always be the case.
There's an interesting distinction between what you described, like Meryl Streep coming, doing the hard legwork, getting this level, working her way up, whereas I sort of see this a little bit of like a level of entitlement, like, oh, all I need to do is start a company and like I'll be rich and famous and sell it to Google, and it's completely unrealistic, obviously, but so I feel like there's almost a negative aspect to that perception, and is that going to damage, the excitement in LA and other cities around the startup ecosystem?
Well, hopefully it won't, because I think that's ultimately the dream. It's like pick a business, pick sports, music, technology, pick any of the store across the street. I mean, I think everybody's dream when they do something is they want to be the best at it. They want to be recognized for what they do, and at some point, you want to make money from it. I think, generally speaking. And not everybody will.
General Motors doesn't, but.
Well, you kind of hope that people in this room and not in this room, that everybody, I think, starting a company who's sitting in this room somehow thinks they're going to be successful, and Google's going to buy them, or something. I mean, I think that's the reason you do this. You just spend a lot of time not making any money, work really, really hard, and there's a huge amount of competition. And everybody who thinks they have a unique idea, and of course there are some unique ideas, but there's probably somebody else out there doing pretty much the same thing. And it's a question of kind of the luck of the draw. So you're looking at David here, who's been a successful entrepreneur, and you'd almost ask somebody like him who's been successful doing it, how did you survive? How did you do it? And it had to be through passion and talent, and also some luck.
In your case, a lot of luck.
Yeah, that's right. Finding fingernails. Yeah.
So we got about 18 minutes with Jim, so let's open up to questions. Anyone? Sure, first hand, go ahead.
Yeah, Jim, I was just kind of wondering, like, I see a lot in terms of the convergence of the entertainment and tech space and startups in that realm. There's a lot of emphasis on consumer-based applications and consumer-based startups, and I think there's not as much of an emphasis on enterprise and B2B solutions, which seem to be a really, exponentially growing market. Kind of wondering, from your standpoint, and myself having worked in the entertainment realm as well, where do you see maybe the places where studios, agencies, and major entertainment businesses, the kind of holes they're looking to fill with new technologies in terms of what can be provided?
Well, this is a very generalized statement, but most of the big media companies are still, if you're News Corp, you're in the movie business, you've got cable television, broadcast television. They in theory have some, although John Miller just left, who was in charge of their digital stuff. But I think, everybody is, I think thinking about, how, new technology and how it's going to affect them. And this Paramount Studios is one of the first ones, who really benefited from when they did that movie. I just like the name of the movie. That's huge. Help me out here. 4 years ago, Paranormal Activity. Which cost almost nothing, and if you look at it, it's probably one of the most, or maybe the most successful movie ever made financially, because it cost almost nothing. It did hundreds of millions of dollars worth of business between, release through theatrical release, through pay television, through free television, through home video, So I think everybody is kind of now looking toward, social media, how to use it properly, how do you access data. There was a blurb that went out today that one of the theater chains said that we'll reward you for not texting during the movie. Which is kind of an interesting commentary, because if you're sitting there as a studio executive and you're saying, oh my gosh, should I make this $50 or $60 or $80 or $100 million movie, and that through social media, literally that night somebody, could be enough people trashing the movie where all the money, the $50 million you just spent opening it, could be counteracted by getting a lot of negative negative input. So everybody's very, I think, you know, people are really sensitive to this, and they're trying to figure out how to use it better. And I think it's, you know, it's really, it's on the minds of everybody. Now, saying that, they still do things traditionally. They still spend $50 million opening a movie, and generally it's not, it's, you know, they may pay Facebook something, or they'll pay somebody else, but it's basically on television ads, newspaper ads, billboard ads. It's still the same, kind of the same way it's been done for a long time, and it's going to have to change.
From an investor standpoint, we would like to see more B2B software. Like we don't, I talked about that at another panel, is that we don't see a lot of that. It's just rare, but, all right, hold on, okay, let me get him over there and I'll come right back, then you're next, you guys. Go ahead.
Hi, what's your take on who's staying in the audience, and how do you think they'll make money in the next 5 years?
I think they will through brand support, you know, brand advertising, and I think they will get, you know, they'll make money from it through celebrities doing endorsements that are more specific, you know, that are emanate from the research and data that come out of it, and you know, it will definitely be an opportunity for them to make money, because it really is just, it's a data source for celebrities to monetize their brand, not through just acting in a movie. And I think that's going to be a big thing, is if you are a brand, and I keep using the word brand because back in the old days when I started, you would never refer to an artist as a brand. I remember having that conversation with Eddie Murphy. I said, "You're like a great brand." He says, "I'm not a brand, man. Never call me that, or I'll fire you." and now today he'll say, "I'm a brand." And how do I utilize it? But getting back to your question, is how they monetize their recognition, their, you know, what they do in a way which they can make money from is going to be really, it's an important adjunct to what everybody does.
Will that take budget from like the agencies though? Like,
What do you
are the
mean?
agencies supposed to get those brand deals for them?
Yeah.
Instead of,
Yeah, they do, and you know, and that's part of, you know, as I was saying, we work for General Motors and Starbucks, and you know, Paul Rico here, who's not here tonight, was one of the guys that ran that business. And yeah, you know, brands are very interested. They want to figure out a way to get closer to talent in a way where they can integrate talent. Years ago, if I keep using Eddie Murphy, so I'm going to use somebody else's name, Tony Danza, very successful. Did a show called Taxi and did Who's the Boss, and very successful. He's one of the godfathers of one of my girls who's very close with me. But if he would fight, if ABC Network and the production company at Sony on Who's the Boss try to integrate, have a Pepsi sitting here, he would say, "No way. I'm not going to be part of promoting somebody like that. I'm not going to promote a product unless they pay me directly." Now today, that integration of those brands into entertainment is, everybody acknowledges that has to happen because it's a way of helping to promote, pay for a product. But all these kind of changes were subtle because you could never use those words. You say, "Well, you know, put this bottle of Arrowhead water there that's prominent here." No way. Didn't used to be.
Now, it's like, which way do we hold?
Red Bull, yeah. No, but now you do want to integrate in because Red Bull will pay to be in that intellectual property. And by the way, for a lot of the content, for a lot of the people in this room are doing it, like internet or web-based content, you know, it's not inconceivable. I mean, there's some people here in this building right here, one of whom used to work for me, who's working with Purina. You know, if they're gonna fund content, they may go ahead and fund an entire, you know, set of content, you know, just because they want to integrate Purina into it.
That's exactly what they want to do. I mean, they have a
Yeah.
huge budget and they're trying to get good ideas in a way to deliver their message.
Yeah, so and this is all about, you know, rather than just having a 30-second ad, which costs a lot of money and produce, and, you know, look at, we all know, because I'm sure we all do it, you know, you can skip through commercials pretty easily now, so you got to figure out some way, and people are spending billions of dollars trying to get recognition for their product out there, and it may be that they want to spend it doing a web show, because maybe they'll think they can integrate their product into it.
All right, right here, and then I got you, but go ahead, you first.
I come from the music side, and I know a lot of A&R people are sort of mining big data to find what band, unsigned band they can find. Is that happening on the agency level? I mean, we know about YouTube stars becoming, how aggressive, and is there actual tools inside of the agency, or saying, yeah, we're monitoring if somebody, you know, or is it more traditional? everybody saw this viral video, we should go check this out? Or is there an investment in technology?
I think there's a mix of it. It's still, agencies are generally still try to work with, quote, stars, but, you know, I keep always thinking of Fred that came off of YouTube, and all of a sudden became this instant star and did a movie. So people are minding it, and people are looking. It's, you know, there are divisions of all these companies that spend all of their time looking at whether it's, you know, they're taking the, you know, because the A&R business is much different than it used to be. But the A&R is really, you know, through, I'm thinking of that Korean star, I think it's really his name, you know, who just launched like this.
Size?
Thank you. But I mean, so everybody's using that and looking to see who becomes, you know, that really is the A&R business now. You know, is you know, how somebody breaking, and the music business, needless to say, everybody knows how it's changed. It's, you know, the big business in that business now is the touring business.
But would the agencies be receptive to a technology product that helped them do that better? Like,
Yes.
if you came in the door with, here's my tool that will help you find stars sooner, faster, and cheaper, is that something they would test?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's,
Absolutely.
I'm good at synthesizing.
Really
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, it's better off than you getting off the bus and trying to knock on somebody's door and get recognized. I mean, trying to get recognized, it used to be in the old days, you get recognized by doing local theater, and you'd hope somebody would come and say, you're a casting director, and say, oh gee, this person's really talented, and, you know, I'm gonna introduce them to, you know, get them in to read for a show. Now that still goes on, but, you know, a lot of people, talent's getting recognized through other sources, other than just doing local theater.
All right. Yeah.
This, my question was also about brand alignment. I know like 50 Cent and some artists like that have made a lot of money because they
Yes.
had an initial investment in Vitamin Water, which
Yes.
was an emerging brand which Coke bought. You know, the Kardashians are involved with Shoe Dazzle, which is an e-commerce tech platform.
Brian
So-
Garrett.
So is there a way for emerging brands or new tech companies to approach the agencies, and would they be receptive to
Yes.
talent like that, or is there kind of minimums? Or
No, they are,
barriers
and
to-
there's been enough occasions, and I used to work with 50 Cent, and he's an incredibly smart guy, and he had a great eye for this, and yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the ongoing branding of trying to find people, which is to get, to find people who will get involved early on, and they're, you know, every company who somehow works around entertainers or musicians are all looking for those opportunities.
And you have to be kind of creative at how you approach it, because a lot of these companies may not have a large upfront fee to pay these artists, but if it was like constructed like the Vitamin Water deal.
I think that, you know, the creative thing comes from who's selling it and who's saying it to you, because a lot of times, you know, if somebody that you work with saying, hey, I think this is really a great idea, you should take a look at it, that's kind of how it happens. A lot of times it won't work out, but I think people are really open to finding those next opportunities. And when you have a company, you have somebody like 50 Cent or Jay-Z, or do what he did, or do, you know, with the headphones with Jimmy Iovine, and you do that, people are looking for those opportunities, and you never know where it's going to come from. Who knew that Vitamin Water was going to be that successful, and 50 Cent would make $50 million doing it? I mean, if you would have asked him when it started, he didn't think that would be the result, but it was.
All right, you then you, that guy, then that guy.
So we're all obviously, you know, somehow involved in the LA tech scene, and you know, I've personally had a lot of experience working with both clients and investors up in the Bay Area, and there's definitely, coming from LA, this weird kind of jaded feeling that everybody up there is in a startup and has a great idea and is just looking for funding, and it gets to be very incestuous. And then the reverse is that, you know, investors from the Bay Area look at LA and it's Hollywood. So, you know, what do you think are like the core things that need to happen in LA for us to differentiate the tech scene here to be successful?
I kind of think it's happening subtly, but I think your question is a good one, because, you know, whether it's gravitating or whether you should move your business to the Silicon Valley. And I think a lot of it, you'll probably know this way better than I do, but I think a lot of the key to it is engineers, and being able to recruit and have people here that can really support the growth of the technology world, because there's, you know, Silicon Valley became, you know, where a lot of venture firms, and there's a lot of money, you know, from there, this has been a different kind of market than that, but I do think this is a potentially big growth market because media and entertainment tended to be here, and if you can figure out the juxtaposition or the mix of how that works. But I do think a key to it, again, you can answer it better than I can, but my guess is that what you need here is to make sure that if you're gonna launch companies here, that you have the right kind of technology help engineers that are gonna be here rather than going up north. And you know, I think that's kind of
Back to the talent.
yeah, it's back to town, but it also feels like it's kind of, you know, with this company here and there's other companies like this, I think it's become kind of exciting. You've got Google here with 350,000 square feet, which is an Facebook, you know, is around here. You've got companies, bigger companies now that are around here that are, you know, are a lot of talented people who at some point, if you're one of the 350,000 square feet and the thousands of people that work for Google, you probably have opportunities here to pick people off that you never had before.
We're getting validated. I mean, we brought in Tim Draper as an investor here, and when I was out talking to him about a potential investment in Amplify, he was like, you know, I'm not that hip on LA. It just seems like a lot of flash, blah, blah, blah. They had made some previous investments here with another fund, and anyway, we talked him into coming in on an investment, and he has been super happy with his investment.
He's gotten to look at a lot of stuff that he's.
And he plays volleyball in Huntington Beach
Yeah.
now. So I mean, he's really become a Los
No,
Angeles.
they're totally sold on the whole LA thing, and his investments here have been amazing, and he's actually been probably one of our biggest angel investor in our companies.
We got to get. I mean, LA's got to get some more exits. I think that's going to be pretty.
Yeah, and I think that. By the way, I
And
agree.
exits that stick around when they put money back into it.
Yeah, I mean, like
PayPal, Google, Stanford, like all the.
or that
alumni.
spawn, like take Cornerstone On Demand, the big software company that went public. Like, is that company going to spawn out some more software companies? I hope so. Like, there's not that many of those guys.
And also in the universities here too. I mean, it's been important. I mean, there's been, you know, there's really been an emphasis here on, you know, people coming out of universities and just not leaving here and staying here. I think there also is a, you know, is a big opportunity. We talked about this. I'm on the board of the USC Cinematic Arts School, which used to be the USC Cinema School, but thanks to Steven Spielberg and George Lucas and a vote, we changed the name of the school. But we talk about this all the time in our board meetings, about the mix of technology and people coming out of the Cinematic Arts School and technology and the mix of it. And it's become, the campus down there has become a real hub of where people who want to be a not movie star, but filmmakers, directors, writers, creation of content, but you also have the people in the technology area that are all kind of hanging out together. That didn't used to happen. And I think that as a result of that, I think it's going to be really good for this area.
Okay, last one back here.
Hey, Jim.
Hi.
So I just want to talk a little bit about the burgeoning industry of crowdfunding and how that could play a big role in shifting a lot of the different means of distribution with film financing. And I want to, so I feel like there is a little bit of a barrier to entry right now with technology being accepted in media and generating, you know, finance for films. And in specific, what do you think about established filmmakers and crowdfunding and that different means of distribution to kind of raise an initial budget? Not necessarily distribute the movie, but just the initial part of it. And because of the built-in audience, do you think there's a platform that be accepted among the media side, or do you think that's even viable?
Well, I think it's viable, and you know, film. Before I came here, I just left a meeting where, you know, in a company who's in the education business, in a sense, has a school in Florida where they also have great tax breaks. Part of, you know, is really emphasizing about exactly what you're describing about the integration of money and film funding around young, talented new people. And there's a fund that's a $150 million fund that we're in the process of doing right now. It'll be really dedicated just to Florida, but crowdfunding is part of it. And it's really a big emphasis on it. Traditionally, though, funding for movies still tends to come from sources where you're not consciously thinking of It's because it's just the way it's been done, and it's the way people are used to doing, and it's the way banks, and a lot of this has to do with banks as well, traditional banks, about what banks will fund and finance. So there's a lot of work to do in this area, and a lot of it is because institutionally, and God, a lot of you either grew up in this or you're in this, institutionally, when you're working in a company, and this is the way business used to be. At my company, at William Morris, all of a sudden we had 950 employees, and we should have had 650. And part of it was like, this is the way we do it, and we have to hire more people doing it this way, versus thinking out of the box and thinking, how can we be smart, creating opportunities, using money differently, deploying assets and money differently. And I think this is all, it's like, how do you quantify, and I think about this all the time, how do you quantify? Is it going to take a year? Is it going to take 5 years? How much has already been done? But it feels, I look at my two little daughters and look how they consume content and how they consume games, and I can't even imagine I never had that, and I watched them. So I just think we're kind of at this is like this isn't the beginning, but it's beginning stages of great opportunity, and there's going to be a lot of amazing companies that come out of it, and we'll see, I think, changes. Just kind of wrapping up, I grew up in the entertainment business, and now watch, there's Viacom, which if Sumner Redstone, who claims he's never going to die, he's 90 years old, let's assume he never does, but at some point maybe he will, Viacom will get sold. Sony right now is being shopped. Sony Corporation is, I think, shopping what used to be Columbia Pictures and used to be TriStar, which they own. But there are going to be new people entering the business who maybe it's Apple, maybe it's it's some other entity that's going to come in the way that back in the old days by the way, when AOL spun out from Time Warner, when they separated, I was their first board member. So when we and AOL is now a little bit of 3.5. The new AOL is 3.5 years old, and we gave a lot of thought as to how AOL would be in the content business, and they're doing very well doing it. But I think we're at this cusp right now again of we're going to all see, it's not going to be business as usual, and people who are going to be entrepreneurial and smart are going to figure out the way historically they always have, and I think they'll get the smartest and the best, and will survive and be the winners.
Nice, cool, good way to end. Thank you. We really appreciate you coming out.